Our world is a very big and intricate place. So how would you like to make one? Welcome, scholars, storytellers, and fellow babysitter DMs. This is the Level Up Corner, led by yours truly, Wizo, as we delve into all the tips and tricks about Dungeons & Dragons. Today's topic is world building. Now, world building is exactly what it sounds like. It's where you create an entire world, or at least that's what most people think. See, world building is actually about giving detail to a world to make it feel alive. For example, if someone asks, "How do I propose to this person in my game world?" you could give a standard ring, or you could give them marriage blossom, which is a flower that grows in the fields and is only given by lovers to one another. And when given on a knee in a proposition, you are asking them to be engaged to you and to bind each other in holy matrimony. Now, this is just a nice little touch that brings some detail to the world and makes it come alive. But world building can be anything. It doesn't have to be just these small little details. It can be extremely important to your campaign. With all this, I've probably overwhelmed you a little bit, and rightly so, because it could get out of hand. So in order to not make world building become too big and get out of hand, we need to narrow down our focus. Find an area to start with and stick to those smaller instances first. Now, where you begin your world building is always with what is most pertinent to your game. For example, what are your players doing? What is important to your players? What details need to be filled in? Well, this is what world building is there for. If your players are going to start in a town, you need to figure out that town. You need to give it a name, you need to figure out the size of the town, and you need to figure out just everything in general. And the best way to start with getting an idea of what this area is going to be like, their culture, the size of the town, how important of a trading hub is, everything pretty much is with geography. If your town is located in a very high point in the mountains, it's not going to be a big town. No surprise there. It's not going to be a big town with a lot of trade hubs and everything else. That might just be a small group of people trying to go and explore the world. And this has already given your players and you an interesting storyline. Your players know nothing of the world because they're in this isolated little mountain village. So they need to go somewhere else. They need to go down to the valley towards the town that is located along the river, which is a great spot for trade. A town along the river is also more likely to have population. A town along the river in a forest might have different hunting and everything else along those lines, but a swamp might be a bit harder to get to. It's probably not a giant trade hub, not a thriving location. And you can already see what happens with geography. Figuring out the geography of your area in world building is usually the first step that you need to do in order to make something grand. It's the first thing you need to do in order to figure out all the other details that come afterward. Next, you want to figure out any important details to the plot. So, for example, if your players are going to deal with a corrupt noble, you have to make the noble, and you'll have to also, logically, figure out how hierarchy and the different rungs of society work together. What is it to be an urchin in this society? Is it not bad? Is it awful? To the point where you're almost kicked and abused as a slave? Just for being poor? Well, it's up to you to decide. It's also up to you to decide how the aristocracy will try to view other people or interact with each other. You get to make up new families and everything else. If you have a very political campaign, you are making things one step at a time. Now, this is something that a lot of world builders don't really take into account, is that you create one thing at a time. You make little building blocks and you place them upon each other in order to create something grand. You make the town of Mountainshire, and then you make the town of Swampville. Maybe in 5 sessions, you make the bustling town of Marketsville, or hopefully a bit more creative than that. But you could give them names along those lines. You could start to add little pieces here and there. You also expand by figuring out the area around them. In Mountainshire, they're in the mountains of High Peaks or something along those lines. You figure out those mountains. You figure out and flesh out the area. And as you do this slowly over time, you are able to create a world. Now, there are some worlds out there that are completely done and made. These are what people think of as living worlds, or worlds that are just gigantic. They have continents made. You can see that there are different countries. You go at any point in those countries and you go to a town and they have whole documents listed out for what happens in the town. And you might think, wow, that's impressive. And it is, but it's only by going through this one step at a time. They didn't start out with 20 different countries and multiple continents. They slowly added them in. They slowly started with the local level, the city, the area around it, and the ground up. Now you can also world build based upon what your players are interested in. If your players are, taking the marriage gold example, interested in flowers and what they signify in your world, then you can go into making up new flowers, to making up more detailed things about them. If your players are interested in the mechanical properties of said flowers, for example, how does this go into my potions, or does it make me a potion of haste or a potion of speed or something along those lines, then you can get flowers that actually have a mechanical value. This encourages your players to try to harvest and interact with the world around them. And if your players are merely interested in the cultural significance of different flowers, such as Deathglade, signifying the end of time, where it actually turns a different color by being next to a person who's about to die, well, that could actually lead to a lot of other superstitions and potentially give you other ideas. But world building is about adding detail to your world, adding detail to your campaign, your scenario, and where your players are playing. If you would like an example of world building, then you can go to our Twitch at Level Up Corner on Twitch. And on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we actually do world building. So you can go and contribute to building a world, or even taking some of that material and bringing it to your own, or seeing what world building is like, my friends. But keep in mind that we are doing it one step at a time. You'll be able to see that world building is able to be just about whatever you want. You can actually create the geography of an entire world, make continents, landscapes, seas, countries, cities, or more abstract things such as factions, nobility, trade, different plants on these worlds, gems, mines. All this stuff that you can add to your world is done through world building. Now, I hope that this has piqued your interest in world building and given you a little bit of a start, because most people think that they have to go with a grand overview of everything, but you don't have to with world building. In fact, you shouldn't. It's, once again, one building block at a time. But don't let me be the only one to tell you about how to make your own world. Leave a comment down in the comment section down below, or even better yet, join us on Twitch on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We discuss world building, we're trying to make some cool stuff for everyone, and we'll even try to make it into a clean, nice package so that you could potentially even get it later on if you've forgotten about these cool things like blood magic. Just don't forget to like, subscribe, and ding that notification bell so that you can stay informed on all these tips and tricks. And lastly, always remember that your players love and appreciate you. This has been Wizo, and keep rolling, my friends. Keep rolling.